Gunshots in the dark, a dog's final whimper, a man on his knees, shaking, not from fear but from something far more dangerous. Grief. 3 bodies on the floor. One name whispered in the underworld like a curse. John Wick. Not a myth, not a legend. A man who buried his wife. A man who buried his past. And on that night, a man who decided to dig it back up. No context, no hesitation, just pain turning into precision. And that is where resilience truly begins. Not in motivation, but in devastation. Years before the blood-stained suit and whispered assassinations, John Wick was just a husband. A man who had clawed his way out of violence to build something fragile and rare. Peace. In psychological terms, this was his first rebirth. He had exited what trauma researchers call a high adrenaline identity loop. The cycle where danger becomes normal, chaos becomes comfort. But then came loss. Helen's illness wasn't just the death of a partner, it was the death of structure. According to grief studies cited in works like Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl, identity collapse often follows profound loss. Without meaning, even the strongest break. Wick didn't break loudly, he broke silently. Then came the theft, the invasion, the killing of the puppy, the final gift from Helen, a symbol of continuity, of hope. And in one brutal night, hope was executed. Psychology calls this a triggered trauma cascade, when suppressed pain finds a violent outlet. But here's the twist. Resilience is not the absence of rage. It is the discipline of directing it. Spike 1. A single phone call spreads through the Russian syndicate. Baba Yaga. Fear travels faster than bullets. Within 72 hours, John Wick eliminates dozens of trained assassins. Not emotionally, not recklessly, precisely. Measured, controlled, intentional. According to tactical breakdowns in the John Wick universe, his kill efficiency is calculated, with over 70 confirmed kills in the first film alone. But numbers don't define resilience. Consistency does. Pain didn't make him chaotic. Pain made him focused. That is the surprising psychology. Resilience is structured revenge against despair. Reset again. Before he was Baba Yaga, he was a child raised in violence, trained by the Ruska Roma. Discipline wasn't optional. Emotion wasn't rewarded. Survival was currency. When people see Wick endure gunshot wounds, broken ribs, stab injuries, they see physical toughness. But resilience is neurological. Studies in neuroplasticity show that repeated exposure to controlled stress increases mental adaptability. Wick's childhood wasn't kindness, it was conditioning. Every fall trained his nervous system to recalibrate instead of collapse. Outnumbered, and yet unstoppable. Outnumbered, and yet unstoppable. In that sequence, Wick reclaims his identity, not as a widower, not as a victim, but as a force. Identity peak moments define psychological resilience. When a person acts in alignment with their deepest training despite overwhelming odds, the brain reinforces self-trust. Self-trust is resilience's spine. He wasn't fighting Iosef. He was fighting helplessness, and he won. But resilience stories are incomplete without downfall. By the second and third chapters, the high table turns against him. Excommunicado, a $14 million bounty on his head, every assassin in New York activated, sleep-deprived, bleeding, alone. Even the strongest systems crack. There's a scene where Wick leans against a wall, breathing heavy, blood soaking through fabric. You can almost hear the weight in his lungs. Resilience is not glamorous here. It limps, it staggers, it doubts. Psychologists describe this as adaptive persistence, the ability to continue functioning despite cumulative stress. But here's what most miss. Resilience is relational. Despite everything, allies emerge. Winston, the Bowery King, even former enemies. Because resilience isn't isolation, it's influence. Strength attracts loyalty. Another spike. Chapter 4. Osaka, Berlin, Paris. The Arc de Triomphe sequence. Chaos in traffic. Cars smashing. Bodies flying. Wick thrown onto asphalt again and again. He gets up. Again and again and again. Repetition builds myth. But psychologically, repetition builds neural dominance. Every time he stands after impact, the brain wires the message deeper. I survived. This is the surprising truth. Resilience is built through micro decisions under macro pressure. Not grand speeches, tiny choices, repeated. And then, the unexpected vulnerability. The duel at sunrise, no explosions, no armies, just 10 paces, silence. For the first time, John Wick doesn't fight to destroy. He fights to end. Resilience evolves. It matures from rage to release. He collapses on the steps, looking at the sky, not in defeat, in completion, in The Obstacle is the Way. By Ryan Holiday, the Stoic principle is clear. The impediment becomes the path. Wick's suffering didn't detour his life. It defined it.